G'day, I'm Troy, and this is the Comic Book Movie Collector's Guide, the show about collecting all things superhero cinema. And today we're going to take a gander at Swamp Thing, the animated series on a DVD. And we're going to try and answer the question, was this a show or was this a TV commercial? Let's get into it. Swamp Thing is an animated superhero series that went for one season, containing 5 episodes with a runtime of about 22 minutes each. It was first shown on the Fox Kids network, with the pilot episode airing on the 31st of October 1990, followed by 4 additional episodes airing weekly from the 20th of April through to the 11th of May 1991. And it was later released on DVD in the US and the UK in August of 2004, with no Blu-ray or 4K HD as of the release of this video. The animated series was produced by Deke Animation City, Bat Film Productions Incorporated, and DC Comics, and was distributed by Deke Entertainment. Despite the animated series' brief run, a toy line and various merchandise were also produced in '91, which were far more successful than the cartoon. Okay, let's have a look at the disc and case. Now, I have the UK version here, and I don't mind this look. There's the US version has a bit of a blue background. This has got this like red color. I think this is more in tone with what it is. Looks pretty good. I mean, it is relatively basic, just a basic shot, nothing special. Spine, not too bad at all. Don't mind it. And the back, of course, pretty basic, just with the whole 5 episodes, because that's all there is. Gives you a quick rundown of the episodes, not bad. So if we look inside, as usual, you know me, love a good color disc. That is fantastic. And then even an inside picture on the inside sleeve of Swamp Thing, not bad at all. I think they could have done probably a little better, but yeah, not bad. So for this one, I'm probably only going to give this a 5 out of 10. So the premise of this cartoon revolves around Alec Holland, who is a scientist, and he's just on the verge of this breakthrough in science where he's got this plant growth formula which potentially is going to stop world hunger. When one night the evil Arcane and his henchmen break into his lab and try and steal the secret formula. But of course, a wild fight breaks out and Holland is doused with the chemicals. So in a rush, he dives into the swamp to get the chemicals off him, but that causes a chemical reaction with the swamp matter, causing him to mutate into the Swamp Thing. Now that sets up the rest of the show, as Arcane is on this quest to become immortal for some reason, which is never really explained. But in the process, to find these things that he wants to make him immortal, he destroys the environment, and with that process, that's where you get Swamp Thing, who comes along to stop him from destroying the environment, which is kind of the main theme of this show, as it was a big thing in the early 90s with environmental justice cartoons like your Captain Planet and your Toxic Crusaders, just to name a couple. But unlike Captain Planet, that had a bit more story to it, this was just straight up a 22-minute toy ad. That's the best way I can describe it, as the scripts just primarily focused on fitting each item and character out of the toy line in each episode. Just like a toy ad, with very generic and weak scripts, the episodes were just terrible to watch at best. So with that, look, I can only give this a 5 out of 30. Look, this version of Swamp Thing in the cartoons is very surprisingly close to probably the most famous version of the character, with just obvious small changes for the kids' TV cartoon, but close nonetheless, which is good. But the one thing I did find glaringly bad was his translation of powers from the comics to this TV show. And let's just say, yeah, I got a bit loose with it, as what they did was pretty much turn him into a Plastic Man knockoff, with him constantly changing and stretching and all sorts of things. I mean, he can do that in the comics, but not to the extent that he did in this cartoon. And another thing too, Instead of him traveling through the earth like he does to get around, which, let's face it, would probably look boring on screen. The old Swamp Thing, he got around in a buggy. Because, toy sale. So yeah, not quite the Swamp Thing from the comic books. Now, for the voice actors, there were some standard 90s cartoon regulars here. Nothing special. I'll put the list up here. There's not too many people in the show, so pretty short list. But I do have to say that Len Carlson as the Swamp Thing was outstanding. He was great. He really embodied what you would think the Swamp Thing would sound like, and I think he did a fantastic job. Nice one. Now, anyway, with that, look, I'm only going to give this a 10 out of 20. Look, so just like a lot of these releases, it's just the episodes. There is nothing else here, which is a shame. But in these instances with like only 5 episodes, I'm not really surprised either, because I hardly think there's anything out there to do a special feature on, really. So, well, and that's the way it goes. So, as this is special features, and there is none, we get a score of 0 out of 10. Now, the critic score came in at 0%, and the audience score came in at 0%. As well, there was nothing on Rotten Tomatoes. I couldn't find anything. But as usual, IMDb comes to the rescue, and they have a score of 6.4 out of 10, which, yet again, I do not know how their scoring works, as it always seems to be way higher than it should be. Anyway, if we round it up, we're going to get a score of 6 out of 10. Now, I had some low expectations going into this show that, because it only had 5 episodes, it can't be great if that's all it ran for. And, yep, I was right.
It's true.
Look, it's not hard to see why this never took off, as it was just trying to capitalize on the whole environmental warrior cartoons of the early 90s that just seemed to be all the rage at the time. And when you think about it, though, like, if you do think about it, Swamp Thing fits that theme perfectly, because that's what he's like in the comics. He's all about being part of nature. But making it into a show for kids with jamming a toy angle into it, it just ended up being just really poorly executed, which is a shame, because it just had so much potential to work as one of these environmental warrior cartoons. Look, for me, this wasn't great, but then this was kind of par for the course for a lot of those 90s cartoons, in my opinion, but it just didn't seem to connect with the audience it was trying to go for, kind of as much as the other ones in the genre did. And I think that's done by the fact that the eps were just 22-minute toy ads. Look, I know I keep banging on about it, but you watch it and you tell me something different.
I got nothing.
And look, the show was just not compelling, and it just wasn't even like a funny show for kids, so it's not hard to see why they didn't watch it. This is definitely something maybe 90s kids would love on a bit of nostalgia, but for me, who grew up with a lot of awesome 80s cartoons,
80s, man, best shit ever.
This wasn't enjoyable to watch at all. So with that, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 20. So first up is collectability. So if we look on the collector scale, I would say this is probably, look, at the end of the day, this is going to be for your completist collector like myself, or maybe a hardcore Swamp Thing fan, or even maybe some kids, some 90s kids that love that bit of nostalgia. But for anyone else, no real value here whatsoever. Now, as far as availability goes, this one's going to be on the rare side of things for both the UK and US copies. Now, both are just as hard to find. Now, look, I was going to make this on the very rare side of things, but just in the last few months, I've noticed that copies are starting to show up on the secondary markets as people are trying to cash in on the price, as it can fetch a pretty decent price. Which, speaking of, well, we have a look at the average price. And of course, when we're looking at it, oh, look at that. It starts somewhere between $40 and it can go as high as $110 for DVD. And that can be either the UK or US copy. But as usual, nothing for Blu-ray, nothing for 4K. Now the final score, we get a grand total of 33 out of 100. Yeah, not a good score, but I think it's fair nonetheless for that final product. So, we asked the question, was this a show or a toy commercial. It was totally a toy commercial, masquerading as a cartoon. But it worked, as toy sales were good for that line, which at the end of the day, that's how this industry worked. It's all about the toys.
Those toys were everywhere.
Hey, so if you like this video, I've got some more reviews right here. Or maybe you want to see some of my collection updates. I've got you covered as well. Why don't you go check that one out there? And of course, on your way out, why don't you do me a favour? Why don't you just kick me a like there? Or maybe even hit the subscribe button on the way out too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.